Alright, so now that you know just a little bit about color theory and the color wheel, we're going to move on. So we're going to talk about what we need for our watercolor project. So first we actually need our watercolor paper, which watercolor paper is a little bit different. It is not like normal paper because the water actually pools on the top so we can add our pigments from our watercolor palette. So first we need some nice watercolor paper. For this, for basic watercolor, you just need a nice clean bit of water. You need a watercolor palette, and then you need some brushes. I also recommend having a paper towel just to dab your brush off if needed. For our techniques that we're learning today, we're also going to incorporate some salt. So I have some Epsom salt here, but you can use pretty much any type of salt that you want, as well as a straw and a sheet protector. So this is just like any normal, sheet protector that you would have at school. So I have a couple examples. We're going to do 3 different kind of techniques today, and I've got 3 examples here. So the first is a wet on wet technique, and then I actually incorporate some salt into it. So this technique's really fun because it pulls the color in wherever you put the salt. So it leaves some really neat, almost tie-dye textures to it.
Alright, so we've got our watercolor paper. So I'm going to pick a big brush because I want to make sure that I am going to get the most water coverage for my paper. So we're doing the wet on wet technique, which is the one that I previously did with purple and blue and red. So I'm going to actually dip my brush in and get a bunch of water on there. And I've already outlined where I want my water, where my artwork to go. So you don't have to do this, but for me it just gives a nice spot to stop at visually. So I'm actually going to first paint my whole area with water. So what that does is it lays down a really nice area for me to apply my colors to. So I'm gonna, sometimes you have to duck your head down just to see where the water actually is. Kind of move where you are to see that. So we'll get all our water saturate, or our paper saturated where we want it. And then next is the fun part. So we're going to open up our watercolor palette, and we can see that we have a bunch of, I have just a watercolor palette like you guys have in school. So we're going to stick to our color theory and think about what colors we want to use. So I'm going to stick right now to my warm color palette, where I'm going to put reds and oranges and yellows on my paper. So I'm going to get some water and I'm going to put it on my palette. And we want to make sure that we really saturate that watercolor so that we get a lot of paint on our paintbrush. So we want to have some really bright colors for this. So we're going to start adding color just wherever we want. And I've got quite a bit, if you can see on my paintbrush, I have quite a bit of paint on there. So once I have a bit on there, I'm actually going to make sure I really rinse out my brush because we want to not contaminate our other colors on our palette. So I'm going to go over and grab some orange, get it really good. And we can always clean up your palette afterwards with a paper towel just to make sure your colors really don't run. It's kind of hard to keep them from running sometimes, but we're going to add some more nice bright color. Rinse our brush out again. So we're going to change to yellow now. So we're going to go to our yellow. get it nice and saturated with water so that we've got lots of color. And we're going to add some more yellow. So depending on how you'd like your painting to look, if you want it to be a little lighter and brighter, you can always add your light colors first. That way your light colors are going to be the majority of your painting, versus I started with red, which is the darkest kind of color, and that's kind of, you know, making the overall color a little darker than normal. So next, we're also we're going to grab our salt, and we're just going to sprinkle it on wherever we want. So this technique needs a little bit of time, so we're actually going to let that dry. With our salt technique, what we have to do is we actually have to brush all that salt off. So I'm going to brush off my salt into a garbage can over off screen. Get all the salt off of it. And as you can see too, I know I mentioned earlier that I sprinkled I went a little crazy on my sheet protector technique and got some ink on here, or some watercolor on here, but if you guys are doing only one technique, you shouldn't have that problem. So as you can see, it's kind of cool. We've got like a really neat technique, like a textural quality that the salt gives to the paint. So we, I was going to use a marker, but there's also, you know, you can use colored pencils, you can use any kind of, you know, marker, anything like that, pencil. So we've got warm colors, so let's maybe do a dark brown. So we'll pick a dark brown. And I absolutely love great horned owls. So one of our footprints is a great horned owl. So we'll do our great horned owl footprint. So they have really big toes. So actually kind of thicker than most other birds have. So we make kind of a thick toe outline, color it in. And they're also a raptor, so they've got, or they're a bird of prey, excuse me, so they have some really nice talons that kind of show up on their footprint. So every time I draw these, I always think that a lot of these footprints just look just like dinosaurs. Channel your inner dinosaur foot drawer. Alright, so we have our feet, and then we're going to put our claws on. Alright, so now we have got our great horned owl footprint on our salted watercolor technique.